Jason wasn't lazy. He wasn't reckless. He was just stuck, like millions of other Americans working hard and going nowhere. Every Monday, he dragged himself to a job that barely paid the bills. By Friday, his bank account was almost empty again. Rent, gas, groceries, everything swallowed his paycheck before he could breathe. He wasn't living, he was just surviving. He didn't talk about it, but the weight of being broke was always there. It followed him at the gas station when he prayed his card wouldn't decline. It sat with him at night while he ate ramen noodles alone in a silent apartment. He hated checking his bank app, it made him feel small. 32, Jason felt like life was racing ahead and he had missed the starting gun. College hadn't worked out. His student loans still haunted him, and the temporary warehouse job he took years ago became his reality. Friends were getting married, buying homes, building careers. Jason, he was still choosing between fixing his car or paying the electric bill. And the worst part? He couldn't remember the last time he believed things could change. There was shame in his silence. He never told his parents how bad it was. Never shared with friends that he cried in his car some nights. He scrolled past videos of success stories thinking, "That's not for people like me." But deep down, something in him whispered, what if it could be? It happened on a Tuesday. Jason was called into the office, no warning, no build-up. Just a quiet room, a short sentence, and a stack of final papers. "We're letting you go." He didn't even ask why. He just nodded, grabbed his jacket, and walked out like a ghost. The world didn't stop. But for him, everything inside went still. He sat in his car for almost an hour, staring at the dashboard. Numb. Rent was due in 12 days. His savings were gone, wiped clean from trying to stay afloat. The panic didn't hit right away. It crept in slowly, like cold water filling a sinking boat. By the time he got home, his hands were shaking. He didn't even know what to tell his landlord. 2 weeks later, he stood outside a storage unit with everything he owned stacked in boxes. He couldn't afford the apartment anymore. Moving back in with his parents at 32 wasn't the plan. He felt like a burden, a disappointment, a grown man with nothing to show for his life. His mom hugged him tight, but even that made him feel smaller, like a failure dressed in adult clothes. That night, he stared at the ceiling of his childhood room, surrounded by posters from a life that felt like someone else's. He thought about the kid he used to be, full of ideas, hope, big dreams. Where had that kid gone? He couldn't sleep. All he felt was shame, not just for being broke, but for believing, even for a second, that things might ever get better. One morning, Jason woke up earlier than usual, not because he wanted to, but because he couldn't sleep. The silence in his parents' house was loud. He grabbed a notebook from a dusty drawer, one he hadn't touched in years, and without thinking too much, he wrote down 3 things he wanted to do that day. They weren't big, just simple tasks. Apply for 2 jobs, take a walk, read for 15 minutes. It wasn't some big plan. He wasn't trying to change his life. He just needed something to feel real, to give structure to days that felt like a blur. Every morning, he did the same thing. Woke up, wrote 3 goals, then tried to check them off. Most days, he didn't finish all of them, but it gave him a reason to get up, just enough to push through. At first, it felt pointless. Writing down goals didn't get him a job. It didn't fix his bank account. But something strange happened after a few weeks. He started to feel a little more in control. He was still broke, still living in a room that wasn't his. But inside, something was shifting. The habit was quiet, invisible, but it was building something he hadn't felt in a long time: momentum. One of the goals he wrote one morning was read for 15 minutes. He opened a book he found on his dad's shelf about personal growth. The pages were full of things he'd never paid attention to before: mindset, discipline, financial basics. He didn't get it all, but he kept reading. Not because it was changing everything, but because, for the first time in a long while, he felt like maybe he could. Weeks passed, and the notebook started to fill up, page after page of small, daily goals. It didn't look like much, but it created a rhythm in Jason's life. Mornings weren't empty anymore. He had a reason to wake up, even if it was just to check off 3 boxes. That tiny routine grounded him when everything else felt out of control. As the habit continued, something inside began to shift. Jason wasn't just writing down goals, he was starting to follow through. He noticed patterns in his thinking. He became more aware of how he spent time, what drained him, and what made him sharper. Instead of scrolling mindlessly or complaining, he caught himself asking, "What's one thing I can do better today?" He started reading every day, not just for 15 minutes, but sometimes for hours. He got obsessed with learning personal finance, self-discipline, simple investing. YouTube became his free classroom. He realized how little he had known about money, about focus, about self-worth. Slowly, his mindset evolved. He wasn't chasing quick wins anymore. He was building something deeper. The biggest change? Who he spent time with. He stopped texting the same old friends who only wanted to hang out, complain, and stay stuck. He joined free online communities where people were growing, building, sharing. He didn't say much at first, just listened. But being around that energy made him want more for himself. That little morning habit had started something bigger than he ever expected. With everything he'd been learning, Jason started to feel something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. He kept hearing stories about people starting small businesses online, flipping products, creating digital services. One night, he made a bold choice. He took the last $300 he had saved and bought a batch of phone accessories to sell online. Felt like a risk, but also like a shot at freedom. At first, he was excited. He watched tutorials, set up an online store, even created a few social media posts to promote the products. But the sales never came. Weeks passed. A few clicks, one refund, and then nothing. The boxes sat in his closet like a quiet reminder that dreaming big didn't always mean winning big. The buzz of excitement turned into silence and self-doubt. He felt crushed. All that learning, all that momentum, and he still failed. It brought back the same feeling he had when he lost his job. That maybe he just wasn't built for success. One night, staring at his unsold inventory, he whispered to himself, "Maybe I was stupid to think I could change." The shame hit hard. He didn't even want to open his notebook the next morning. But something was different this time. Instead of walking away completely, he gave himself one more day. One more goal. One more morning habit. Deep down, something told him the failure wasn't the end. It was part of the process. He didn't know what the next move was, but quitting wasn't it. Jason could have walked away. No one would have blamed him. But instead of throwing out the boxes or deleting the store, he sat down with his notebook and wrote one simple question. Why didn't it work? That morning, instead of setting goals, he made a list, what he did right, what he rushed, what he completely missed. For the first time, failure became feedback. He realized he hadn't studied his market. He picked a product he wouldn't even buy himself. His website looked rushed and his marketing, almost non-existent. The truth hurt, but it was clear. He hadn't failed because he was stupid. He failed because he treated the hustle like a lottery ticket, not like a business. That shift in perspective changed everything. His morning habit became deeper. Now he wasn't just writing goals, he was tracking progress, reflecting on mistakes, asking better questions. He kept reading, but with sharper eyes. He started studying customer psychology, digital marketing, and business fundamentals. He began to see patterns. Things he didn't even know existed when he launched the first time. He was learning not just what to do, but how to think. And that's when something clicked. Failure wasn't a stop sign, it was a lesson plan. Every mistake had a lesson baked into it, and thanks to that one simple habit, he was paying attention now. He didn't need a miracle. He needed resilience, patience, and one more try with more wisdom this time. It didn't come like a lightning bolt. The idea showed up on an ordinary morning, while Jason was reading a post in one of the online communities he'd quietly followed for months. Someone shared a problem they kept running into while managing a small online store. Jason had dealt with the same issue during his failed hustle. But this time, instead of just nodding, a thought popped into his head. What if I built something to solve that? He grabbed his notebook and sketched out a simple tool, nothing fancy, just a way to help small sellers organize their inventory and customer messages. It wasn't groundbreaking, but it was real. It solved a problem he understood. This time, he didn't rush. He asked questions in forums, validated the idea, and built a rough version using free tools and tutorials. Everything he needed, he learned online. He launched quietly, just a link shared in a discussion thread. No big ad campaign, no hype. But within a few days, someone messaged him asking if they could pay for extra features. Then another person. Then another. It wasn't viral, but it was working. For the first time, people were paying him for something he created. And it all came from months of showing up, learning, and thinking differently. Jason doubled down. Each day he kept writing goals, kept reading, kept improving the product. He didn't treat it like a gamble. He treated it like a craft. It grew slowly but steady, built on lessons, not luck. And every small win felt bigger because it came from everything he'd once thought was a failure. The first $50 felt unreal. Then came $200. By month 3, Jason had passed $2,000. A few months later, he hit $10,000 in total revenue. It wasn't millions, but to a guy who once couldn't afford gas, it felt like climbing a mountain. For the first time, he saw proof that his ideas had value, and people were willing to pay for it. But right behind that excitement, fear crept in. What if this all falls apart? He thought late one night. He'd failed before. What if this was another fluke? The pressure of trying to keep it all together started weighing on him. Some friends brushed off his progress, saying it was just a phase. Even his family seemed confused, gently asking when he'd get a real job again. Their doubt echoed the little voice in his own head. He started hesitating, taking longer to reply to customers, skipping a few goals in the morning. For the first time in months, he felt stuck again. It wasn't because the business was falling, it was growing. But now he had something to lose. That scared him more than being broke. He questioned everything. Was he really built for this? Or had he just been lucky? In the middle of that storm, he returned to the habit that started it all. He opened his old notebook and flipped through the pages. He saw the early goals, the lessons, the pain, the wins. And then he remembered he didn't get this far by accident. He had built it one day at a time. He didn't need to have all the answers. He just had to keep showing up. After wrestling with fear and doubt, Jason made a quiet promise to himself. If he'd come this far through consistency, then he'd go all in. No shortcuts, no backup plan, just full focus on what was working. He doubled down, refining the product, improving customer support, reinvesting profits. He worked long nights, not out of desperation anymore, but with purpose. The business kept growing. Word of mouth spread. Small blogs started mentioning his tool, and a few YouTubers featured it in videos. Jason stayed behind the scenes, building, learning, adjusting. He hired help, upgraded systems, and built a small remote team. In just a few years, that idea born in silence became a company generating millions. But numbers weren't what hit him the hardest. One summer morning, he drove to his childhood neighborhood and parked in front of his mom's old house. He knocked on the door, held out an envelope with the final payment slip, and said, "It's yours now. No more mortgage." His mom cried. He cried. It wasn't just about the house, it was about everything that came before it. The nights he felt like giving up. The fear. The failure. The habit that changed it all. Later that night, alone in his home office, Jason opened his first notebook again. It was worn out, pages curled, ink fading. But there it was, his very first goal, scribbled in shaky handwriting. Figure out a way to never be broke again. He smiled through tears. He had no idea how back then. But one small habit, repeated with heart, had rewritten his entire story. Jason often found himself reflecting, not on the money, the business, or even the freedom, but on that morning. The one where everything felt hopeless and he picked up a pen to write 3 simple goals. He didn't know it then, but that quiet, consistent act would become the foundation for everything. It wasn't magic. It wasn't talent. It was showing up one small step at a time. Looking back, it wasn't the idea that made him a millionaire. It wasn't even the product. It was the habit of thinking intentionally every single day. That's what changed the way he saw failure, money, and himself. And even now, after everything, he still starts each morning the same way. Notebook open, mind clear, 3 goals written down. The habit stayed. So did the results. People always ask me what the secret was, Jason says. And they expect me to say something big, something flashy. But the truth is, success isn't about big changes. It's about small, daily choices. The boring ones. The invisible ones. The ones no one sees but you. That's the part no one teaches. Consistency beats intensity. Every time. So now he looks at the camera, smiling. Not as someone lucky, but as someone who chose a different path. If you're stuck, broke, lost, you don't need to fix your whole life today. Just start with one habit. Just one. The rest will come. Then he pauses, leans in, and asks, "What habit will you start today?"